In this lesson, we'll begin adding some high-frequency detail to our model, and we'll take a look at some of the presets that we can use in Cinema 4D. So up to this point, we've been using these tools to kind of sculpt individual details, but what if we want to create, for instance, a sort of skin texture across the surface, or maybe a bumpy texture across the surface of some of these scales? Well, we can use stamps or stencils to do that. So on many of these different tools, you can actually include a stamp. So here you can see that I've selected the stamp tab here, and you can bring in a stamp, which will bring up all of these values. Let's go ahead and take a look at a preset, and then we'll kind of dissect what's going on. So we're going to go up here under Sculpting, Layers to Presets, and let's go into Sculpting, Sculpt Brush Presets. And we want to do a sort of skin texture, so let's go into the Organic folder, and let's get this Scales 01, and I'm just going to double click on it. And you can see that that's loaded it up. Sometimes it'll switch because it's going to be using a different brush. This happens to be using the pull brush, so it's actually stayed on the pull brush, but you can see the settings have changed. So here we have a stamp image that is actually being used. Okay, you can see that image down here. So the light areas are going to be raised up, the darker areas are not. You can also see if we go into rotation, so the rotation of the stamp, it's actually set to randomness between 0 and 100. So it has some random rotation that's going to occur when we paint it. So you're not going to see a lot of seams. Okay. We also have the ability when we're using symmetry to flip that across, so it'll be symmetrical, which is what we want. We have the stamp turned on. Okay. You can see that we have our gray value by default set to 0.356. That just indicates what's going to be either pulled up or pushed in. And we can see this by looking at show depth. So in the red areas are going to be slightly pushed in, and the green areas are going to be pulled up. So that if we come in here and just sculpt, I'm going to take this down a little bit. We have areas that are being pushed in and pulled up. In some cases, you may want the areas only to be pulled up, okay, or you may want only to be pushed in, and so you can change the gray value accordingly. I'll go ahead and leave it at the default settings. All right, the fall off is the same. You can see we've changed the size. You can also change the pressure as well. Okay, you can see there's also a setting here. It's 34% for spacing between them, and the buildup is set to 50 for this particular one. The draw mode is set to a freehand stroke. If we wanted to change that, we could go in here. It's a little hard to see if I can select it. Maybe I can't. It's a little bit hard to access here from our screen capture, but you can change your draw mode to be able to draw these out. We'll take a look at that in a second once I can get that selected here. Okay, here we go. Change it to a drag rectangle, and you can see I can actually pull out one copy of this, which can be a nice way to add detail as well. So I can come in here and just drag these copies around. Before I do that though, I want to make sure that the detail that I have is on a layer. So let's create a new layer. I'm just going to call this something like skin. And I'm going to start adding that detail. And I'm not really going to be too careful at all about where I add it. So let me go ahead and select the freehand stroke again. There we go. There's also a dabs where you can just drag a copy wherever you want it and then let go. But I'm just going to use the freehand. Okay, I want to make sure that symmetry is on. So let me go into symmetry, turn on X symmetry here, and let me increase the strength a little bit. And I'm just going to come in and start to paint. Okay, I'm not going to again be too careful about where I'm painting, because I can always erase it out of that particular layer, but I want to make sure to get at least the large open areas of skin. Okay, and I'm not doing anything too deep. Okay, it's fairly light. You can see at this resolution we're able to get some nice detail in here. Okay, let's do the same thing back here. And let's go up to these areas. Kind of drop in some along the arm. And so you can see it's using that stamp image to create the sculpted detail. It's a really nice way of kind of breaking up the surface, especially these larger, smoother areas. Okay, go ahead and we can decrease our brush size if we want to get some of these other areas that are down here. Moving up around some of these bits along the head. Staying fairly light as we come up to the head and these scales. Okay, now if you've come in and you've created some of that skin detail, for instance, on this abdomen that we don't want, we can simply go into erase and just erase that back out. Okay, and again, since we have it on a layer, we can dial in the strength of the layer if we want to dial that strength down so it's not quite so drastic. I think I like it at 100%, so we'll leave it there. All right, so now let's say we want to add a different kind of detail, maybe to some of these scales back here, or something bumpy. And so what we can do is, I'm just going to actually leave it on the same skin layer. You can create a new layer if you want to, but let's go in back to our presets. I'll hit the up arrow to jump back up, and let's go into noise. And I'm just going to select maybe this noise 6, double click, turn on symmetry, and you can see that it's changed now to this new brush with a new stamp here. Let's take our brush size down a little bit. And you can see it has a steady stroke associated with it. Let me go ahead and increase the size or the scale a little bit. Smooth that out. Okay, bring some of that bumpy detail, really sort of high frequency stuff in here. Make that a little bit bumpier. Same thing here. Just a little bit different look than some of the other bits here. Okay, so just trying to make it stand out a little bit more. If you want to bring in a little bit of that, I'm going to take the brush size down though to do that. If I want to add a little bit of that bumpiness to some of these scales. Okay, same thing here. If you wanted to turn off your steady stroke, you could do that, and then you could just kind of get in here and drop in some of that bumpiness. Maybe on some of these larger scales, and drop that bumpiness up there. All right, and so just add a little bit of that high frequency detail in particular areas if you want to come in and kind of along the edges, maybe emphasize that a little bit more. Increase your strength a little bit, your pressure. And you can certainly do that. Okay, so if you have your own stamps that you want to use, you can certainly do that too. You just go into your pull, and if you wanted to, you could just reset the brush, go into your stamp, load up an image that you've created, and then change your settings from there. So you can change the rotation to be random, just as we looked at, and you can change the spacing between the stamps, and you can change the draw mode if you have certain details that you want to just draw out an individual instance of. You can use the drag rectangle or the dab. All right, so once we've got our high frequency details sculpted and finished up, let's go ahead and look at how we can start to bake out maps for ambient occlusion and the normal map and displacement maps all within Cinema 4D. So we'll take a look at that process starting in the next lesson.